Before we start the show, I want to remind everyone that while the SAG-AFTRA and Writers Guild of America strike is going on, we can still support those who are picketing for a better future. Some of you are wondering, how can we support our wonderful creative artists who are on the front lines fighting for better residuals? You can visit the Entertainment Community Fund website and make your donation there. I will also include in the description other donation sites you can visit and help support the cause. However, if you're unable to donate for those in need of the strike, make sure you spread the word on various social media sites you're on. And to all the people out there who are protesting, the Lone Screenplay Nominee Podcast supports your efforts and will continue to do so until a justified deal is made. Without your hard work, spending hours upon hours, pouring your hearts and souls into making these wonderful films, we wouldn't be able to experience such amazing stories as we've been able to do so for over 100 years so far. Keep up the great work, guys, and stay hydrated. Hello, listeners! Welcome to the Lone Screenplay Nominee Podcast, where we talk about films that were solely nominated for an Oscar in the writing categories. I'm your host, Matthew Anderson, and today we have Nick Zednik, or as I like to call him, Zeddy, who is a co-host of his own podcast that he co-hosts with with the Carusos, the Vigilante 39 Podcast. Welcome to the show, Zeddy. How are you doing today?
Matt, I'm doing great, man. I'm happy to be here. I know you and I have kind of been friends for a few years now. We've been bonding over the Oscars over the last few years. I got to thank the pandemic for something. But
Yep.
I'm happy to be here because I feel like you and I talk about movies all the time, but we never really actually have a good chance to sit down and really kind of talk about like a movie per se, kind of like break it down in a really unique way. So I'm excited, happy to be here.
Yeah, I should also point out to our listeners out there, in case you aren't familiar, excuse me for the language, but this motherfucker right here, if I could just go into that little story that we talked about like for years, ever since we both met. Long story short, I met our mutual friend, Nico Caruso, through Twitter after him and Zeddy went to Sundance.
Mm-hmm.
This was like, I think, a couple months prior to the Academy Awards when Nomadland was about to win Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, we were all thinking, oh, Nomadland's going to win the cinematography prize. And then once the American Society of Cinematography Guild, the ASC, I think that's their name, they said, nope, we're going to give the cinematography award to Mank. And Zeddy asked Nico and I, hey guys, do you think with this new guild win that Mank could pull off the win? After all, it's only winning production design as well.
Right.
And Nico and I brushed it off. But this guy right here, this son of a bitch, said, nope, I'm going to predict Mank. And
Yep.
when it won the category, I thought, you got to be kidding me. Like, he got it. He called it.
Yeah.
So ever since then, we have been discussing, even prior to the episode, we were talking about some like cinematography potentials for this upcoming year. But we were also talking about how Zeddy was also the one that predicted, between the two of us, had predicted Dune Part 1 to win the cinematography award.
Mm-hmm.
And it took us a while last year with All Quiet on the Western Front, because you had thought Top Gun Maverick was going to get in until it got snubbed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so this year, well, we have a couple ideas for that, but we're not here to talk about that.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about a movie from the 2014s. But before we do, I have a couple questions for you, Zeddy, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
that I want to ask. So, would you care to explain to our audience what exactly it is you do for a living, or what your podcast, The Vigilante 39, is all about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So by day, I guess I'll say I am a massage therapist, and what I do in my hobby per se, if that's really what you want to call it, because I love doing it. I do co-host the Vigilante 1939 podcast. It's a pop culture comic book movie related podcast. So if you love like DC, Marvel, Star Wars, pop culture, everything like that, because we do like we do a little stuff like talking about Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon. We kind of throw a little something like that that's in the realm in our podcast as well. Definitely give it a shot. It's available anywhere you find your podcasts at. So Spotify, SoundCloud, Podbean, wherever you kind of listen to your podcast at, give it a shot, because I think it's a great time. it has more of like that, think of like you're a bunch of guys kind of sitting in a bar or a restaurant, kind of just talking, just talking, having fun. That's kind of the vibe that we go for.
Yeah, I think I managed to listen to a couple of episodes in the past. Not recently, though, because I've been busy with trying to go job hunting and
Yeah.
creating my own podcast, of course, and getting on various guests. So it's kind of hard to get caught up with other podcasts. But I also agree. If you get a chance, check them out, and hopefully you enjoy the show.
Thank you.
So my next question I wanted to ask is, I always ask this with every guest, and I'm going to ask you again as well, Zeddy. It's a little bit tough to ask someone what's their favorite film of all time. So I might as well ask, what's your favorite genre, or, like, I guess in this case, like maybe subgenre, so to speak.
Yeah, my favorite genre is, I mean, like, can't really call blockbuster like a genre in and of itself, but I love just action movies, and I love just drama. So something like a combination of like action and drama is really what my wheelhouse is.
Nice.
hmm
Yeah, I definitely see you and Nico talk about other action movies,
hmm
and yeah, no, it's it's fun. I mean, obviously, even superheroes is like its
Right.
own subgenre of the action
hmm
field.
Yeah,
And yeah, there's a lot of good ones out there, and there's also a lot of bad ones out there.
that's true.
Um, yeah. So, like I said, great to have you on the show
Yeah.
to discuss a 2014 film of your choosing, and we'll get to the film itself in just a second before I go over this, little introduction for our audience. So, yeah, like I said, we're going to do a spoiler talk of Nightcrawler, a film directed and written by Dan Gilroy. This won't be a beat by beat bulletin presentation like you hear on other channels, but we will be discussing major spoilers, as I mentioned, for our chat. If you haven't seen the film yet, I'm a bit surprised it took you this long to finally want to decide to watch it when it's been out for almost 10 years. But whatever, go ahead and watch it first, and then come back so you can hear us talk about it in full detail. Onto the notes. Filmmaker Dan Gilroy came up with the idea of the film in 1988 after reading a photo book called Naked City, which was a collection of photos from the 40s taken from Ouija of New York City residents at night. He eventually shelved the idea once Public Eye in 1992 came out. Once Dan moved to LA, Dan Gilroy, I should say, and noticed how populated it was with violent crime stories on local news stations, he went back to the drawing board and even discovered the stringer profession. Seeing this as an opportunity to have this element to be a modern equivalent of what Ouija was doing, Dan utilized this as a chance of finally writing the script for this, and drew inspiration from anti-heroes from films like The King of Comedy and The Talented Mr. Ripley. The film was produced on a budget of $8.5 million and had its world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival and opened nationwide on Halloween of 2014, grossing over $50 million worldwide. The film received rave reviews from critics and audiences, which was also being regarded as by some as a cult classic over the years. Dan Gilroy went on to direct Roman J. Israel Esquire, which got Denzel Washington nominated for an Academy Award in the lead actor category, and Velvet Buzzsaw, both of which had received mixed to negative reactions. And I had a guest on last week, Joey Magnuson, big shout out to him, who discussed very briefly that he was also one of the many people who didn't care much for what was the film? Roman J. Israel Esquire. So he's, one of the many who had the reactions for the film. Despite that, getting multiple nominations for this film, Jake Gyllenhaal was nominated from the Golden Globes, Critics' Choice, Screen Actors Guild, and the BAFTA, and yet he was still shut out of the lead actor category at the Academy Awards. And, there were a bunch of others that were kicked out too. I remember David Oyelowo was predicted by many to be like, oh yeah, he's going to be like the front runner for the Oscar and he'll win the category.
Yeah.
But yeah, surprisingly enough, David Oyelowo and Jake Gyllenhaal were like one of the many lead actor contenders that just got shut out. And in my opinion, he was probably kicked out by Bradley Cooper, who earned his third consecutive acting nomination for American Sniper. We'll get more into the whole lead actor snub when we get to the award section of the show. But in the meantime, I'll just go over our log line for the film, for Nightcrawler. When Lewis Bloom, a con man desperate for work, muscles into the world of LA crime journalism, He blurs the line between observer and participant to become the star of his own story. One of the things I want to ask you, Zeddy, is why did you choose to cover this on the show? And I assume you'd already seen the movie before in the past.
Hmm. Yeah, so this is actually, I know as you know, Matt, Jake Gyllenhaal is actually one of my favorite actors of all time. So this is actually, it's not my favorite Jake Gyllenhaal performance, but I do think that it is one of his all-time best, and I do think that is one of the
Yeah.
best just all-around performances I've seen in terms of like an actor who just loses himself in a role, which I think Gyllenhaal does in this movie. But I think the reason why I chose it now is especially with the uptick in how like the internet has kind of like increased. It's such a culturally relevant movie, I feel like, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But
Mhm.
it's definitely a movie that I think speaks more now than it did back in 2014.
Yeah. I agree. Jake Gyllenhaal, he's such an interesting character actor, and it's shocking that his only Oscar nomination he has so far is still Brokeback Mountain.
Brokeback Mountain,
And
yeah.
I wonder, obviously this was like one of the few times where he got pretty close to getting nominated again, because I mentioned he got the whole precursor thing. And we've seen in past, especially with the other categories like director or some of these other fields, where it's like, just because you get all the precursor nominations
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean you're automatically given an Oscar nomination. I'm pretty sure it's someone like Bradley Cooper for directing A Star Is Born got all the major precursor guilds, Golden Globe, Critics' Choice,
Mm-hmm.
DGA, and the BAFTA, and he still missed out
Right. It's
on the
hard.
Oscar nomination. So yeah, it's always interesting about that. Yeah, so I'd wanted to ask, but while we're diving into the movie and going into full spoilers, do you remember how your first experience was for the film as a whole when you first saw this, or how you discovered it?
Yeah, I think when I initially had saw it, so like 2014, I had just graduated high school. I was still like fully engrossing myself back into like, the genre itself as far as like following Oscar movies and everything like that. Cause there was that period where like I kind of slowed down in terms of like watching movies, following movies. Cause there's that period in life where, you're kind of trying to enjoy life and sometimes entertainment takes a backseat, you're focused on going out with friends, dating, everything like that, going to college. So there was like some movies that like I initially like missed out on, and thankfully Nightcrawler wasn't one of them. But I
Okay.
remember when when I initially had saw the movie, it was like a scary, still kind of like a scary movie per se, because like it's such a scary premise in terms of like what
Mhm.
Jake Gyllenhaal's character actually is. And I think if you're a fan of Jake Gyllenhaal, you automatically like, you may like the movie or you may love the movie. But
Yeah.
to me, it's still like the movie didn't peak yet, because I don't think that it doesn't like pop at you just yet. Whereas like you watch the movie now, and you see like something like TikTok, and you see something like Twitter, and you see something like Instagram, and you see like how obsessive people are with that and trying to like get attention and like seek attention, kind of like how Lewis
Yeah.
Bloom's character was. It's a movie that I think ages well over time, which I think
Yeah.
benefits the movie overall. So I think in 2014 it was a great movie. It was a great performance. I would have nominated Gyllenhaal because that's me. But I,
Yeah.
I think the movie didn't discover itself till much later on.
Yeah, and also you have like the parasites, like the fucking TMZ,
Yeah.
even back then, who were just like, "Ooh, yeah, let's try to get in their faces and let's try to block the guys who are trying to
Yeah.
get out of the car and just move."
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, we want to ask you like these stupid questions, or
Right.
whatever, But I mean, obviously, a stringer profession back then was popular, but now it's
Yeah.
that's sort of that idea of like that obsessiveness with the using the camera and then
Mm-hmm.
getting as much coverage as you can and putting it online
Yeah.
is definitely out there now. Thankfully we haven't gotten rid of the idea of television news, although the idea of television is sort of like gone out of the way for cable, and
Mm-hmm.
we instead have our streaming services and such. um yeah, so it was interesting. Yeah, I'm actually kind of interested knowing what other films you had missed in 2014, but we'll talk about that some other time.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've seen this on Halloween. I remember seeing this with my folks, my mom and my stepdad at the time, and I remember liking it. I thought it was a good movie, like for a directorial debut by Dan Gilroy,
Mm-hmm.
who has worked with his brother Tony Gilroy. In the past. I believe they had worked on the Bourne Legacy. Yeah, so they worked together on the Bourne Legacy, and Dan Gilroy is like also a screenwriter in of himself, and he's written other movies as well. But yeah, it was just like I said, it was a really interesting movie enough to where I was like, okay, that was good, I liked it, and like you had said, it didn't take me until a couple rewatches later where I was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, I actually like this a lot better. And and this was one of the many films that were like the opening scene of the movie showcasing, Lou at the like construction site and taking down
Right.
the gate and showing, him being resourceful and getting the watch and trying to sort of negotiate his prices for these like manhole covers and the gates. And you instantly know the kind of character he is right off the spot. You know what his goals are. You know what he is as a person, how far he's willing to go to break the law, and sort of break that moral line, so to speak, already from the beginning. And I like that they established that early on pretty well. And even how, like when he's being rejected multiple times, like the guy at the construction site says, I'm not hiring a fucking thief,
Mm-hmm.
and he just kind of laughs it off like, yeah, I want to strangle you, but I can't do anything about it. Because I don't have that kind of power or, uh,
Mm-hmm.
control over you. And that was that was like a great moment we were shown in screenwriting class at Stevenson, of a great way of setting up a character and who they are and what their goals, like I said. But yeah, like I said, on a rewatch, it just aged a lot better. I will admit this viewing was a bit more passive for me, just
Mm.
because I knew most of the material front to back already, and I had already watched several videos on creating the screenplay lessons. Lessons from a screenplay, I think covered this more in detail about the anti-hero, and he does a great job with that,
Mm-hmm.
covering the movie. But otherwise, yeah, I agree. It's a really solid movie as a whole, and it's a good deconstruction piece on LA.
Yeah.
And it's one that does a good job that isn't being like very obvious and just like, oh, look at it, isn't look, doesn't this message, like Velvet Buzzsaw kind of was, I was told, where it's like, look, Martin isn't
Mm-hmm.
Martin or dull. It's like, yeah, we
Yeah.
get that, or like the Showgirls, a lot of people have issue with that, where it's like, isn't the stripping business, especially in Las Vegas, dangerous? It's like, yeah, we got it, okay. You like we got all the messages for this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple others, like The Idol was another one that was a victim of like trying to say a provocative message, but it's
Right.
like, we get it. Like, do you have anything new to say to this? Anything interestingly, or is it funny enough? And it's like, okay, no,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, no, I mean, you already talked about Jake Gyllenhaal, about how great he is, and he is fantastic in this movie. I also would give him an Oscar nomination for this performance because he's just so damn good in
Yeah.
it. And even though he doesn't do any sort of like transformative work, I mean, he lost 28 pounds for the role,
Right.
but still, it's really, really interesting what he does with it, and what, the acting ticks. And he really does. It's funny because this is like this, and I'm not sure if you've ever seen this other film, Donnie Darko.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's
that's
another
another
really good
that's
one.
another directorial debut
Mm-hmm.
from someone where Jake Gyllenhaal's in it. He's the best part about the movie,
Agreed.
and I don't want to draw too many comparisons because I obviously I respect the artist and the writers, our directors in the industry, but it's funny how after that directorial debut, those directors that go on, Richard Kelly and Dan Gilroy respectively, they don't make they don't have like as big of a hit with their movies anymore, like when they direct again. I find that very interesting, that like little weird coincidence, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's maybe it really was the idea of your movie being a lot more simpler with its structuring and writing, and obviously characters too, with a defined purpose. Going into some of the characters and even some of the plot points of the film, where what was there for you that stood out for you with Nightcrawler?
Mm. Yeah, I think like right off the bat too, it kind of just fully engrosses you in the state of LA. Like I think you had
Mhm.
kind of mentioned it too, like how it's like you're kind of like in LA itself. Like it feels like it's a character in the movie itself too, just because like it feels like a lot of like the scenery. It just feels like it's moody. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of like dark imagery in the movie in terms of like where like Jake Gyllenhaal his character is at a lot of the times. Like, so like the time setting is one thing that I do appreciate too. I just really like the fact that it's so timely too. I mean, like you think about like you and Ed said too. There, Yeah, there are some parallels to, like, movies like Joker, The King of Comedy, Taxi
Yep.
Driver. In terms of, like, it's a character that kind of gets more insane as the movie goes on. Like,
Yeah.
like in the beginning, like you said too, he kind of just starts off with like a guy that you think is just looking for a job, but then he kind of like, we're led to believe he kills a police officer, just to get his watch so
Or at
he
least
can,
beat the shit
or at
out of
least
him. Yeah.
beat the crap out of him so he can just steal his watch. And then uh, um because then when you realize what exactly he needs that for is that he goes to all these pawn shops because he needs money because he's a guy that doesn't have a
Mhm.
job, and then he
Yeah.
convinces just random kid that he probably finds on the internet to essentially just work for him for free because he knows that he doesn't have
Mhm.
money to give him. And he's
Yeah.
essentially just manipulating this kid that you can tell is like kind of innocent in the sense of that he probably like doesn't have anything like to give. He's just a
Yeah.
guy that's looking for a job, and he says it in the movie. Like, he's like living in my garage. I just need a job. I need to like get by in life. And here's this guy that kind of just feeds off people's insecurities anyway.
Mhm.
So it's just a fascinating thing of like how it all kind of like goes about, and how every conversation he has, he's always looking to get something out of somebody. Like, we'll talk about it later, but just the interactions that he has with Rene Russo's character, I think was
Oh
some, are
yeah.
some of the best in the movie itself. And you talk about why this movie got a screenplay nomination. I think it's those scenes in particular of why it got it.
Yeah, and we should also mention the kid who Jake Gyllenhaal's character hires is played by Academy Award winner Riz
Riz
Ahmed.
Ahmed.
He
Yep.
has an Oscar because of the short film he did. That's always great that he
I
I
know.
mean I'm not a big fan of the short film itself, but I'm glad that he has an Oscar, especially seeing how
Hmm.
this would essentially be like a breakthrough role for him, because I was told the other night I was going through doing some research for the episode and looking up some of the other cast members, and Riz Ahmed said that if it weren't for Nightcrawler, he probably would have been done with the acting industry because he didn't get much roles or
Yeah.
like payable enough jobs, and this was like his big breakthrough role, and he did The Night of, which
Hmm.
I think got him an Emmy win for the film, and he
Yeah.
got nominated finally for Sound of Metal, which was a fantastic
Fantastic
movie.
movie. Yeah.
um and yeah, and I mean, you say that the kid is very, he doesn't really have much goals. I call him kind of simple minded, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like he feels very much like the kind of kid who went through high school with like low achieving goals, and he didn't really think much about a future outside of like, oh, I'll probably get a job in the industry, or
Hmm.
somewhere I'll get a job that'll pay off my bills, but he never really thought far ahead like Gyllenhaal's character. And I like that contrast of the two of them, where Gyllenhaal, he's always thinking two steps ahead,
Hmm.
whereas this kid, the I think his name was Rick.
Yeah.
He doesn't even do that at all. He's
Hmm.
just like, whatever, whatever, goes through, and he's like, I want to be treated with respect, and you're like, okay. And Gyllenhaal's like, okay, you want me to treat you with respect, then you got to show me that you're smart enough and you actually are learning.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Paid
yeah,
internship. Yeah.
yeah, and I want to put a pin in that part, because there's something that's like the third act itself is fantastic,
Yeah.
and we'll put a pin in that for later on, a little bit later in the show, because there's so much I want to dissect with that part. But yeah, no, Riz Ahmed's really good in the movie itself, and I like some of the other characters that the crew was it what that Gyllenhaal Lou comes across, like, even and I say this with the utmost respect for him, Bill Paxton,
Hmm.
who's no longer with us. I may not have been the biggest fan of him as an actor overall, but there's very few roles that he's done that were like pretty good. And I would say this one, he fits the bill fairly well
Hmm.
as this like a, stuck up, asshole kind of
Yeah.
stringer. And I like some of the interactions that he has with Lou, at points where he's being asked by Lou, like, do you offer a job? And then as soon as he finds out that Lou is making a lot more money and doing really well and better than him, he's like, okay, I want to try to get the competition in on my end,
Hmm.
so that way I have no one else, to screw me over.
Right.
And yeah, no, it's just a really good interactions with them, and it really is the other. You say it's the Rene Russo and Jake Gyllenhaal interaction, which we'll get into in just a moment. I think it's personally the character actors in it that
Sure.
make the script what it is. Gyllenhaal's really good, Riz Ahmed's good, Bill Paxton's good, but Rene Russo, hiring someone like the two detectives that they have, because for the most part it's not really a heavy ensemble movie like,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, the Grand Budapest Hotel was that year, or
Right.
The Imitation Game or Theory of Everything. Those rely heavily on the act, like a really great set of actors coming together to say the lines. Whereas this one here, it's a very smaller scaled movie, and I was so glad that they decided to go for a more smaller scale movie, just because it makes it a lot more intimate.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, they even said that by going a more smaller scale, they had to restrict themselves with how much they were able to do and what to not do for the film. Like, for example, a lot of executives, I was just reading about this today. Dan Gilroy had mentioned, who's married to Rene Russo as well. He had mentioned that a lot of studio exhibitor, well, it was like financiers, they wanted to finance the movie only if they had, the scene like the intimate scenes between Rene Russo and Jake Gyllenhaal, which we never see in the movie. It's implied
Mm-hmm.
that they probably had sex, but for all we know, Dan Gilroy even says maybe they didn't have sex.
Right.
Maybe, Jake Gyllenhaal's way of wanting to have Rene Russo as, to be almost like a mother to him. Maybe for all we know, he's, reading him bedtime stories before
Right.
he goes to bed,
Mm-hmm.
going, before taking a nap. We don't know. And I like that they establish how, and that theory is kind of interesting that the director brought that up, because even in his earlier interactions as a stringer, Lou Bloom, as creepy as he is with those, big
I
eyes,
was just gonna say,
um,
yeah.
he's such a socially awkward character, but he's able to adapt, like immediately knows all this shit going on, even with when he's following the one guy after he's trying to, bring the camera in close for, like a guy being pulled out of a car. It's like, all right, back the hell up, get out of here. You too, get out of here too. And he's overhearing the guy having, this other stringer having a conversation on his phone, like negotiating prices for,
Mm-hmm.
a stringer job. Like, hey, I got like 3 tapes to do. I'll go with 300. Okay, how about 400? Okay, done. Things like that. And he's learning as he's progressing too, and he's sort of thinking on his feet immediately. And because of that, like you said, it like that goes into his personality a lot more, because anytime that he's losing out on money, he's like, I don't want to be the last guy at the dinner plate, grabbing the last cookie
Mm-hmm.
on the table. I want to make sure I'm the first one there grabbing that chocolate chip cookie before anyone else does.
Mm-hmm.
And but no, I just thought that was really, really interesting in of itself. Just again, and it all goes back to Jake Gyllenhaal being just a really good character actor too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So going on, I wanted to hear your take on the Rene Russo and, Jake Gyllenhaal, because you feel that
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the reason why the film got the lone screenplay nomination. I just want to hear your take on that, on those
Mm-hmm.
interactions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating how the relationship actually progresses throughout the movie. Like you kind of so eloquently actually set up where it kind of just starts off of like, Lewis is like going to like these different news stations. He's just looking to like pass off his work so he can get money. And then he just so happens to find a more or less credible news station who probably wouldn't consider even working with him if they weren't kind of like they even mentioned it too, like if the news station wasn't as credible as other news stations, and it's all
Yeah.
about the ratings in the entertainment industry. That's ultimately what it lies down to, which is why again the movie is so socially relevant. Is like, you put out a tweet, you want ratings, you want likes, you want retweets, because that gets you traction, that gets your name out there. And it's a fascinating look on the news station as well, because you really don't think about how does the news really get the news, right? Like that
Yeah.
aspect of it isn't really it's not really told to us as the viewer. You're just led to believe like, there's just cameramen out there and they shoot it.
Yeah.
But why it's interesting is that there would be a character like Lewis Bloom who's out there essentially setting up crime scenes for his own gain, framing it
Yeah.
in a specific way so then he can sell it for a bigger price because he knows that if it's shot on the news, it's more money and attention for him because he even says it, well, I want my name. I want my production company on the name of
Was it like video production
yeah,
news,
video
I think it
production
was?
news, right? And then
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because there's one like dinner scene with Rene Russo and Jake Gyllenhaal where like she ultimately agrees to go out with him to dinner because he like asked her out, and in a way, like, yeah, you're led to believe that there's like romantic interests involved there, and like maybe to Gyllenhaal there is, but I think what he was really trying to do was he was just trying to hold the power because
Yep.
he knows that he ultimately has the power over her because he's the one giving her the work that she needs for her news station. She's not
Yep.
giving him work; he's doing so. I think in a way it was just to establish that he's in charge, and she's terrified because she knows that if she stops working with him, she potentially loses her news station. But then he does the thing where he flips the script because he did his research, right? Where he's like, I notice you don't really stick at a job for more than 2 years, and your 2 years is kind of coming up.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I stop giving you what you need and I go somewhere else, right? And like that's the scary
Mhm.
part of it all is like something like that would happen in real life.
Even with the that end bit though, when we get closer to the end where he he did the whole like shootout murder at the mansion,
Mm-hmm.
and he's talking about he's like, oh yeah, oh no, there's another news station about 5 minute drive I can do, so see ya. And then
Right.
she's like, no, come on back, because
Mm-hmm.
she's desperate, like you said, she's very desperate, like I
Mm-hmm.
need to have this guy work for us or we're fucked.
Yeah.
And the one I'm glad you brought up the whole news thing, because the one thing I liked about how the film treats its news section of the film is that there's no obvious statements on the commentary regarding with whether or not the news station should show this graphic material, like where's the morality line to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost presented as a matter of fact, like whatever, it's like this all the time. But there's no like obvious statements, because whenever you do a movie with with a clear message behind it, they're so obvious and on the nose, as I mentioned earlier, about like, ooh, we get the message, okay, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But this is done as a more like matter of fact, like
Mm-hmm.
this is how this is, like, can we run with it? Yeah, so long as we don't show the address and pixel out the faces, then we should be fine. How about morally? Who gives a shit about morality? Okay, are we gonna do this or no? Okay, cool, perfect. And it kind of lets the audience decide on their own that kind of question of, is this a good idea morally to do shit like this on the news, or do you want to be more boring where you don't get enough ratings?
Mm-hmm.
Because as much as we want to criticize the news for talking about bullshit stories all the time, unfortunately that's what gets the viewers.
Right.
You do something, like even with some of these politicians, without naming any names, they do a lot of ridiculous shit going on,
Mm-hmm.
and that gets publicized on the news, and you're like, oh god, why is this going on the news? Why is this going out in the world? It's like, that's how you draw the attention,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, and it's very clearly stated that in the film. And that was something I admired about Dan Gilroy, and I was like, yeah, again, it just kind of goes back to that idea, like this guy really had something on his table with this film, like he, you know and it all goes back to the more smaller scale, because anytime a filmmaker goes for a more bigger scaled film and you're
Mm-hmm.
doing a story like this, their egos, I mean, depending on who the director is, but whatever it is, there's a good chance that your ego may increase, and because of that, it sort of diminishes any, the chance that you're trying to get this message out about news corporations being bad. It kind of diminishes that, because it's like, okay, now you're stating the obvious for us, and we don't want that. We
Mm-hmm.
sort of want to paint, like, just put them in enough of a hole, in enough of a room, so that the audience can figure it out, and if they don't, you at least have an entertaining story.
Right.
Because you think of other films, like Drive was another one, I'm pretty sure, which was like a deconstruction of LA,
Mm-hmm.
but you wouldn't notice that. You would just think, wow, this is a really cool car chase movie, that's a drama. It's really inventive and creative, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And even David Lynch, when he did Eraserhead and he did all these other movies like Mulholland Drive, he just wanted to make a movie. He
Right.
wasn't interested about, like, oh, I got to create this like overtly like ambiguous message, because it's like, it doesn't matter. And I even talk about how with I talk about it with a couple of people too, but particularly my grandma. I always bring up the fact that we were told a story about a guy who drew a painting of a red wagon out on the playground, and a bunch of kids are being asked, like, "What do you think of that? What do you think of this?" And it kind of goes back to that idea of like, let the audience piece it. You could throw in some clues here and there, but let the audience decide on what to do with that. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think just to add to your point, like it's just a world that feels lived in. Like
Hmm.
it feels like you can watch that world and you can just be terrified at like something like this would exist. You know, I mean, like that's the terrifying part to me is that it's like when Jake Gyllenhaal goes inside the mansion and he essentially fiddles with the crime scene just so he can angle it, he can frame his shots better. That's
Mhm.
kind of like terrifying because that's not, like I said, that's not something like when you watch the news and how things are framed. You're not thinking like, well, do cameramen like fiddle with a crime scene so they can angle, like they can get a better camera angle because it benefits their news station if it looks better than what somebody else would do? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and like he thinks he gets away with it, and you know, and he's like he's touching the walls in the house. He's not even like washing his hands. I mean, like he essentially could have got caught essentially anytime if he wanted to. I mean, especially like when the police interrogate him and they know
Yeah.
instantly. It's almost like I like that they don't actually make the police dumb, in which case they would in a lot of movies like this.
Yeah.
It's almost like the one. Not that I'm trying to like stereotype police because that's not what I'm trying
No,
to
no,
do at
no.
all.
Yeah.
Because like the one like female cop in the movie almost just like has it from the get go where he's like, I know exactly who you are, I know exactly what you did, and it's only a matter of time before you slip up. Like I love him, and I
Yeah.
just love how essentially she catches him, and he has like that one moment in the movie where he's like in an interrogation room, and he just looks at the camera and he's like, I'm screwed, but you know what? You technically didn't catch me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Even you know that's funny too. Even with the fingerprints, because that came before the police went to his house, right?
Right? Yeah.
It kind of makes me wonder. Maybe the police did have an idea of like, oh, Lou's fingerprints are all over
Mm-hmm.
this, you know, and all over the
Right, like he's
refrigerator that
touching the
he's on.
railings, he's touching walls. I mean,
Mhm.
he's touching the counters. I mean, like it's a crime scene. I mean, my prior knowledge is that crime scene investigators investigate every piece of evidence that is in the house. So I mean, unless he happened to be wearing latex gloves that are the same skin color or color as his skin, I'm pretty sure that there should be fingerprints all over the house.
Yeah. The other aspect I wanted to bring up was obviously the mirrors. Well, the actually just the whole like I love the section with when Lou fails to get to the airplane crash and Joe gets there before him,
Right.
and that's like the low like in terms of like screenplay lessons. I'm pretty that was one of the lessons that we learned of like you know typically if you're going to do a story like this you have to sort of put the character at the lowest point that it possibly could, and this is it. This is like one of those times where it's
Mm-hmm.
like he's at the lowest he can. He fucked up. He was supposed to get like this would have been a great news coverage for the news team to do, but now they got shit. They got,
Mm-hmm.
you know, nothing. You know, they got like, yeah, just like petty crimes, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, no, I wanted something real that you promised me. And this is all after the dinner scene too.
Mm-hmm.
Um and then Lou, you know, freaks out in his bathroom and breaks the mirror,
The famous meme.
which yeah, that's me.
That's
And the
me.
one thing I keep forgetting is that in reality, he actually cut his hand open because that was kind of improvised that he wasn't supposed to break the mirror,
Mm-hmm.
and he got about like 14 stitches. And I'm not sure if you noticed this, but at the beginning of the movie, when he's going to the construction guy, you notice how he puts both of his hands behind his back when he's walking with him. You know, kind of like
Mm.
like
Yeah.
like Darth Vader did in Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And he did, and the reason why he only stuck his one hand up is because his other arm is in a cast, or at least has some sort of bandage covering it. So you know, anytime they do a wide shot, he has to sort of put his hand down and be like, okay, you
Yeah.
can't see the hand. So I wonder if that sort of trick or that acting tick was something that like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is what Lou would do, because it isn't just I got to cover my hand. It's like this is what Lou would think on the spot of like how to negotiate. You know, he wants to think of himself as like a higher than like a piece of shit person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it really, it just again, it really got to give credit to Jake Gyllenhaal on the screenplay for
Yeah.
like, very much, because it wasn't just a whole Dan Gilroy's gonna want to shoot a movie with Jake Gyllenhaal. It's
Right.
like he was very much like Jake also put some input in the movie, and as far as I know, Dan Gilroy even said that Jake never changed one piece of dialogue from the screenplay. Like all the dialogue that Lou Bloom says, he was able to do it, and he was able to memorize it while prepping for the role and losing the weight for the film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I like I said, I love that moment where so Lou goes to Joe's house and he cuts the cord on the brakes on the van for Joe,
Mm-hmm.
and even them like trying to race to it. And I love that it's almost like foreshadowing of what's to come if anyone else crosses him, especially for Rick.
Right.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
even though Rick may not know Lou was the cause of Joe's accident with the car crash,
Mm-hmm.
he's at least he may not, and if he were probably a smarter character, he'd be like, oh, you did this, and
Right.
whatever. It's us as an audience knowing that, and now we know how far Lou is willing to go, and as you had said, as the film progresses, he goes more insane, is willing to just do
Yeah.
whatever it takes so he can get what he wants out of life.
Hmm.
And I love that section of the movie. Was there anything about the third act or anything else in the movie that you enjoyed or you
Mm.
thought like really stood out to you?
Yeah, I liked the. I mean, I wouldn't say I liked it because it's not really like it was funny, but it's like you watch the movie and like you notice how some movies, like even like a Christopher Nolan movie, will have like some humor to it. It might be
Mhm.
kind of like offhand humor, like it's not something that like will make you like giggle or anything like that, but it's kind of like humorous. It's like we watched this movie and there's nothing really that screams like laugh out loud. I mean, maybe like some of Bill Paxton's like quid pro quos to like Louis Bloom in the movie
Yeah.
might be a little funny to you because he's Bill Paxton. But there
Yeah.
was like one scene when it was like Rick and Lou's like first kind of like Nightcrawler, so to speak, and
Mhm.
Rick had screwed up by not giving Lou the proper directions, and
Mhm.
then like Lou just goes off on him in the car, and then like there was like this one like subtle moment where he's like, it was only like 6 blocks, and like Jake Gyllenhaal just like looks at him,
Oh yeah.
and like
He's
Rick
like,
is
I'm
just
I'm ready to kill
like,
you.
I'm ready to kill you, and it's like he like just yells at him, and it's like that's kind of like a more, it's like a humorous part, but it's not funny because in a sense of like he wants to like probably murder the guy, but it's something
Yeah.
like it's like other than that, there's really it's not like a humorous movie at all. It's more like
No.
it's a straight like dark thriller, and usually the movies like that they'll try to throw something in there to try to get the audience to like stay into it. So
Like the Marvel films
like the
do.
Marvel films do. So it is a movie that it really is just captivated by the performances in the movie.
Yeah. And even the one other scene, well, there's two other scenes that kind of like one of them I kind of smirked at, but the other really just it just shows the sort of the character dynamic power between Lou and Rick.
Hmm.
One was where it's established that Lou now has enough money to afford to get this like fancy red car, was it like a muscle car?
Right.
And they're at the gas station, and Rick pulls out the gas thing after he fills it up and he puts it back into the whatever it is, gas station.
Hmm.
And then Luce, comments Rick to like, hey, I just want to let you know you're doing, I've seen you over the past couple months or whatever it was. And I see you're really improving. So I just wanted to say thank you. I also want to tell you that if you ever, and he tells them about how, what was it? It was like, if you ever and ever do that, pulling the gas all over my car paint,
Yeah.
I'll make sure you're fired and you never work for me
Right.
again.
Right.
Things like that. I thought that
Hmm.
was great. But the other one I liked was where they're negotiating for a price,
Mm.
and it's starting of the third act where Jake Gyllenhaal and Riz Ahmed, they're both trying to find these people, and I
Oh yeah.
never, the one thing I never even realized also was that uh I keep forgetting he intentionally made sure not to give the faces on to the news crew, because not just because he wants to find the people himself, but he also thinks, oh, by continuing this crime I can get more money out of it.
Hmm.
That's why he asked for like 15,000 for the his original price for the first set of the first tape.
Right.
And the moment when they're negotiating on price and he's like, well, instead of $30, can you get $75? You got it. And then immediately he's like, I should have gotten more. I could have gotten more, could I? I'm like, yeah, you
Yep.
did.
Yeah. Yeah. That was pretty
Um,
good.
so that was great. But yeah, as far as like the finale, I think is really great. And
Hmm.
one thing I think even Lessons of a Screenplay had stated, or someone said out there, was it's interesting how, in my opinion, I'm just going through my notes. It's interesting how what's his name? Rick
Hmm.
had his fate sealed once when he started asking him for more money after the deal that they made, and he's like, no, fuck that, I want half of that bonus that we're both gonna get for this.
Hmm.
And I wonder if that was in like that thought process of like, it's already building up, okay, this is the last stop, and I whatever it takes, I just want to say yes to this guy, so that way I could screw him over and actually get him killed, however it takes.
Right.
And he even tells him, I want you to go out there and get, when they reach the donut shop or wherever they're at, like, I want you to take the camera and go out to the other end. You'll be safer there than in here. And he's trying to find ways of trying to get the guy. And it isn't until that car crash occurs and he gets Rick killed just because Lou was like, yeah, this guy's dead. Get the camera over here. Come on. And then he gets out of the way. So that way Rick's the one that gets shot, not Lou, by the driver. So I thought that was pretty interesting, in terms of that aspect of it. But now I just want to ask what your take on that, just the third act in general. Like you said.
I mean, I don't think Lou actually really leaves the car until Rick gets shot, if my memory serves me correct. So it was almost like he was waiting for Rick to really get shot, because at the end of the day, I mean, you're expendable till you no longer are, right? And that's really the morality of the third act, is that, he wasn't in this to make friends. He was in this for fame, and he's in it for glory, and he's in it for fortune. He was just using Rick the entire time because, he can't be everywhere at once. And when you're a one-man crew, you obviously need to use somebody to get what you need. And the second that he put somebody else in harm's way, because he's not going to put himself in harm's way, because if he does, game over, right? So, and it is ultimately sad, because in the end, it's like, if there is a moral person in the movie, it probably really is Rick. Like, if there really is one person out of that whole cast that is just like a moral person, it probably is Rick, because at the end of the day, he was just somebody that was, just looking for a job, wanted to support himself, probably didn't know what he was getting into. He assumed that this guy was legit, that, that he met, right? Because it's a news company. So maybe, like, if he was a little more intuitive, maybe he kind of picks up on that. Maybe this guy is just using me, because at the end of the day, when he needs to constantly ask, where's my money, or can I get a raise, I think something's a little off there. But that's neither here nor there. The third act itself, I love how it just all plays out too, and that in the end, it's that he makes the call, but he waits, and then when he does it, when the police get there, that's when he tells Rick to, like, get out there and go shoot it, because everything's gonna go down. And once all, like, the shooting starts, Rick kind of, I think he, like, tells Rick to, like, move in closer to, like, frame a better shot. And then, like, the car crash happens, and then Rick gets shot. And then once Lou, like, approaches Rick, he's like, I got you. You failed. I got you, And then it's like, then kind of Lou just moves on. So it is kind of scary to an extent that, like, that is what somebody would do. And that in the end, then it's like, once you lose somebody, they don't care. They got to save themselves. They got to still do what you got to do to survive. This isn't something like the movie Twister, where, you're going to try to save as much as your crew.
Another Bill Paxton
movie, which does kind of have some correlations too in the end too, of how, like, that's again two rival, like, news companies trying to get Twister. It's not that there's any correlation, but you can make that, I guess, if you want to. But it's, what I'm saying, like, but, like, they all try to still save each other. Like, no one's really out to, like, be the one person to try to, get the shot per se. Everybody's, still trying to be there for each other, whereas Lou was just waiting for Rick to be expendable so he can move on. And obviously the ending shot of, like, he ultimately ends up getting rich and can afford his own production company. And they all kind of go off in the sunset. Is a bit wild, but I think it still fits the story as well.
Yeah, the other note I wanted to make was that whole car chase. I miss when nowadays modern action movies don't do this, where there's and I'll talk a bit more about actually I might as well talk about it now. The score by James Newton Howard I thought was, like, one of my quibbles with the film, where it's like, it's fine, it's nothing spectacular, and I've always thought him to be, like, a decent composer, but nothing great. But at the same time, I like that there's sort of tension racking up once the police arrived at the donut shop or whatever they're going to, and then it stops once the shootout happens and the whole car chase. And I wish more action movies would do that, because there's moments in there's just something about it where, and I think I already said this too on other podcasts they've been on, where when there's so much maximum tensity going on, from the way it's shot to the way it's edited to the way the sound mix is, there's no need to sort of overpower it with the score. You don't
Right.
need that. And that was I remember that was part of my reason why I wasn't a huge fan of All Quiet on the Western Front as much, just
Mm-hmm.
because there's like a lot of tense moments in it, but you don't need that like heavy score in it. Like the
Right.
tanks are coming in, like, oh crap, there's flamethrowers out in the distance. It's like, you don't need a score. Like
Mm-hmm.
you could honestly do this. Like even Saving Private Ryan did that too, where it's like, we're not going to overpower this with score. There's a great sequence in The Dark Knight, and you would probably agree with me too, with the Batmobile trying to save Harvey Dent
Yep.
in the tunnels. And that whole sequence is like, there's no score. The only time there is when they're transitioning from going from the tunnels upwards, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then that's it. That's the only kind of music cue there is for that section.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. And they just, like I said, and even as of this recording, I just rewatched Jurassic Park. That's another good example of, not creating a score for an already tense moment when the
Mm-hmm.
T-Rex comes out of the paddock and, tears the two cars apart. I thought that was great. It was just another great example of like, we need more of this in these action movies and these
Mm-hmm.
thrillers. It's like, if there's already so much tension going on in everything else you need to make a movie, you don't need a score to like maximize that tension, like,
Yes.
tell the audience like auditorially, like, ooh, this is a really tense scene, like, are they gonna make it?
Mm-hmm.
Even with like Jake Gyllenhaal like zooming past all these cars, it's like
Yeah.
that visual alone is enough to make the audience grip the chair ends or whatever, like holders onto
Mm-hmm.
the edge of their seat, like, oh, what's gonna happen,
Right.
um
Yeah.
so I thought that was great. And the other thing I wanted to note was earlier in the film, I think I might have mentioned this, well, maybe I didn't, when I was telling you I was watching the movie, I did notice when he was doing the interview with Rick that the only thing he has on the table is a glass of water.
Yep.
And it shows how much of a cheapskate he is, because it shows you how much, like, because usually a lot of other restaurants, they don't charge you
They
for a
won't
glass of
charge you for
water.
water. Yep.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, okay, whatever, and for him to interview this like random kid off the street is like, yeah, I don't really consider you like a big deal shot. It's just like an internship. Even with like, even the place that he chose to do the interview at, it's like, could have easily chose like the Mexican grill that he went
Or a
with
McDonald's.
Nina,
Yeah. Right.
or
Yeah.
yeah, or something. It's just like, yeah, just go with some random schmo
Mm-hmm.
restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I thought that was really great. As far as the movie as a whole, before we get into our awards section of the episode, is there any final thoughts you want to say about the movie itself?
Mm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on the score too as well. I actually appreciated the movie isn't overscored, because I don't think not every movie needs like a riveting, powerful score. I definitely agree with you that you sometimes you can just let the performances and the visual speak for itself, which I think is a highlight of this movie. Could the score have been a little bit better? Sure, maybe it could have. I think the ending score, like the ending scene, is pretty well done. The way that the score is like in the ending shot as it kind of leads into the credits, I think that's pretty well done. But I think there's nothing wrong with like the score just being there but not like recognizable. I think that's fine. In this case, I appreciate the movie how much it flows too. Now, I think the movie flowed pretty well back when I initially saw it, but I mean, this movie's
Yeah,
under, I think it's like under 2 hours too, and it really just like flows from like start to finish. I'm not really checking my clock. I'm not really wondering if this character's gonna come back or not. I'm kind of just in the movie, and I think that's a highlight of the movie itself, is that it's just like entertaining, it's engrossing, it's captivating, it's making you think, but
Mhm.
it's not making you think in a way where you're watching like a Nolan movie, per se, where it's a movie that might scare you now, but like back then it's just an entertaining studio movie is how I would put it. And I think if you haven't seen it, like you said off the top, first off, what are you doing? And second of
yeah.
all, definitely recommend it.
Yeah, it's yeah, no, it was really good. I'm glad I rewatched it again, because I was thinking to myself watching the movie for the show, and I'm like, I mean, granted, I'm only like 4 episodes into the show itself,
Yeah.
but I gotta say, yeah, so far I actually like this a little bit more than Knives Out. Even though Knives Out's a pretty good, another good movie
Yeah.
too, with its own perks that I talked about for another episode.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, Nightcrawler is pretty good, and yeah, no, it's just a really solid movie, and I'm really glad that Dan Gilroy at least got this one out of the way. And you could tell that this one was like something that he had been yearning for to do for such a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and wanted to make it the right way possible without having to make any compromise with any studio heads or anything. And for it being, like I said, a smaller scale movie, it works so much better because now it's like, okay, now you're smaller scale, and even though you have restrictions of your own, you would hope that with it being a smaller scale, you don't have any studio heads down your throats. So, like, you got to have a sex scene with Rene Russo and
Right.
Jake Gyllenhaal, or have these other like ridiculous scenes in the movie. Like, we got to make the point about the newsroom being bad or the news station being bad, like morally corrupt, I should say, obvious. Where it's just like it's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would also recommend it too. I think it's a really solid movie. Before we go, I want to talk about some of the awards chances for the film for Nightcrawler, because it was interesting doing a little bit of research on it and seeing that obviously Jake Gyllenhaal didn't get the Oscar nomination for lead actor. I wanted to ask why you think personally that is the case. I have my reasons, but I want to hear you go first.
As far as what he didn't get nominated for, I mean, the only logical explanation that I can come up with is that it was just too small of a movie, and because of the
Hmm.
time that it was still in, it's like the Academy, as the years have gone on, have started appreciated more smaller movies and performances as we've seen in the last decade. But I think because of the
Yeah.
time that it was at, and yeah, I know that like it went up to 10 still as far as best picture goes, and they started like looking at more movies itself. Um, the only logical thing, yeah, that I can honestly say is that maybe the movie was just too small because the performance is there. So unless like there's a gripe against Jake Gyllenhaal within the Academy, I wouldn't have seen why he wouldn't at least get nominated. Now winning is a totally different story. But
Yeah.
nomination is always the easy part to say that they should get nominated for this. But even looking at like who got nominated like an actor, I can kind of see like then you kind of start to wonder like, well, who do we take out, right? I mean, like, do we take out like a Robert Duvall? Do we take out an Ethan Hawke? Do we not give Mark Ruffalo another nomination? J.K.
Well,
Simmons should have absolutely won for actor, but yeah.
supporting actor,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, for supporting actor, but yeah.
Yeah. So I have a couple theories as to why, and I'm so glad that there's a couple videos out there that talked a little bit about it and addressed this too, and I agree with them. I think the fact that the Academy had such a big bias towards thrillers at the time, because we also have to look at the Best Picture lineup as a
Yeah.
whole. Half of them are biopics.
Mm-hmm.
You have American Sniper, Selma, Theory of Everything, and Imitation Game. All of them except for Selma got acting nominations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing that hurt Gyllenhaal's chances outside of the thriller bias, because also we got to keep in mind too, Gone Girl didn't even make it in for a Best Picture nomination,
Yeah.
and could have easily done it when it was doing so well, getting adapted screenplay nominations from everywhere, and everyone thought at the time, oh, Gillian Flynn, who wrote the book and is writing the screenplay for David Fincher, oh, she's easily going to win adapted screenplay, when at the end of the day she missed the lineup,
Yeah.
and instead they gave the Oscar to who was it, Graham Moore, for The Imitation Game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it was. But I think the other thing that hurt its that hurt Gyllenhaal's chances obviously was American Sniper.
Yeah.
It was such, that film premiered at the AFI Fest, and I think it was Karen M. Peterson, who was on awardcircuit.com at the time with Clayton Davis, Joey Magnuson, and Mark Johnson, and a
Mm-hmm.
couple other folks. I think Karen M. Peterson brought up the fact that she had thought, after seeing American Sniper at the AFI Fest, that there's a chance that Cooper could get nominated for the film. And I don't think anyone except maybe her was predicting it. I don't know who else was predicting it at the time, but
Mm-hmm.
I know that Cooper was a big surprise. I certainly was not expecting him to get in for his third consecutive nomination. I wasn't expecting the movie to be as well liked by Academy voters, and it's directed by Clint Eastwood, a director that the Academy recognized more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, yeah, this is like the first of two times already that Cooper screwed Jake Gyllenhaal out of out of a movie
Yeah.
or awards chances, as if anyone isn't familiar, Gyllenhaal was going to do the Bernstein movie with Cary
Mm-hmm.
Fukunaga from No Time to Die,
Yeah.
but they didn't get the Leonard Bernstein's rights to his music and his story as a whole from the family, and they gave it to Steven Spielberg and Bradley Cooper for Maestro.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, that's my theory as to why Nightcrawler didn't get an Oscar nomination for lead actor for Gyllenhaal. And yeah, I was looking through the other aspects for it too, like editing. It looked like it was pretty decent with like editing chances because it got the ACE Eddie nomination for John Gilroy, and it got the BAFTA nomination. And even if it didn't get Best Picture at BAFTAs, it
Mm-hmm.
still got 4 nominations at least because it was Jake Gyllenhaal, Rene Russo, screenplay, and editing, I think, and
Right.
that's still pretty good.
That's what I would have
Um,
ultimately went with. Rene Russo is another one that I can see a case for Rene Russo too. Which also real quick, just so I can correct myself for your audience as well. I totally named the supporting actors, all the more knowing that Gyllenhaal would have been an actor. So I do apologize. So obviously, like in acting, I mean, you had like a Eddie
yeah,
Redmayne, Steve Carell, Bradley Cooper, Cumberbatch, and then you had Michael Keaton. So
yeah,
kind of a tough five. I mean, if you're gonna knock somebody else, I would say maybe Steve Carell probably could have maybe got knocked out, but then that's you're picking and choosing at this point. So it was already kind of a stacked five. But I just thought I'd correct myself, for your audience that I was looking at the wrong one. I apologize. I was in fact now looking at
yeah.
Factor. Yeah.
No, yeah, no, you're good. But yeah, no, it's yeah, Foxcatcher, that was also another surprise
Yeah.
director nomination. And I think if anything Foxcatcher taught us, and Triangle of Sadness and Cold War, is we got to look out for the film that premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, and because I think Foxcatcher premiered there. I'm pretty sure it
I think
did.
it did. Yeah.
I'm looking through. Yeah, it did. It premiered at Cannes. So got to watch out for those Cannes film festivals,
Mm-hmm.
and who knows? Maybe we might get another one this year.
Yeah.
Because we already know Killers of the Flower Moon is premiered there. Maybe Anatomy of a Fall, or I think Zone of Interest premiered there too. I can't
Yeah.
remember, but we'll have to see how this year's race turns out. Yeah, and the one note, only because we're not going to be talking about this year, I want to make note of. It's weird that Whiplash was campaigned for the original screenplay category, but was deemed by the Academy as adapted because it was based off of the short film that Chazelle had to make in order to get funding for it.
Right.
I find
Mm-hmm.
that very interesting. Even Damien Chazelle was like, why the hell they
I
do that?
know.
Okay, whatever. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
There's nothing adapted. Well, aside from in name only now.
yeah.
That's a
It's like
yeah.
it was based off a short film that didn't come out until the Blu-ray release came out, which is now how you're able to see the short film.
Right.
But still, I was just like, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
Um,
original.
Yeah, but no, but still, I'm not. I don't want to take away Chazelle's screenplay nomination because it was pretty good, and
Mm-hmm.
and I assume if it did get in for original and not adapted, I kind of do wonder if Nightcrawler would have still made it in for original.
Yeah.
Because that lineup also too you had Birdman, which won the Oscar. You had Grand Budapest Hotel, which was probably the runner-up. You had Boyhood, and then you had Foxcatcher. Um,
Yeah.
and I think Foxcatcher might have been a lot closer to picture than we realized because I think it got the Golden Globe nod and it got the Producers Guild of America nomination,
Mm-hmm.
which Nightcrawler did too. But Foxcatcher has 5 nominations, Nightcrawler has 1. Which one do you think had a better shot at picture?
Yeah.
Um,
We can do the math for that one.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, it sucks that Gyllenhaal didn't get nominated, but I will say real quickly, as someone who rewatched American Sniper, and I'll be rewatching the rest of Cooper's Oscar nominations prior to Maestro coming out this year. The American Sniper film didn't age well as I remembered, because I remembered really liking it a lot more as 24, whenever it came out, 2015, 2014. And rewatching it last week, I thought it was like there's a good movie in there somewhere in terms of the story that they're trying to tell and the message behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what saves it for me is the editing and the sound work, as obnoxious as some of the sound work can be. And I thought Cooper did a pretty good job in the film. Like, I personally was impressed by his range in the film, and I remember at the time that was one of the few performances where I was like, oh, okay, so this guy really is proving his range as an actor, and he's a good actor, like he's actually showcasing that no matter how like kind of mediocre or middle of the road the script is, he's actually able to turn it into something more. And we've seen that also with, I mean, he also wrote A Star Is Born too, or had a hand in writing that, but we see how great he can be. And then even working with other directors later down the road, like Paul Thomas Anderson and Guillermo del Toro, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be working with Steven Spielberg in the future on that Bullet movie. So I can't wait to see more of Cooper, and obviously I'm excited for Maestro, as I said before on the show. But yeah, no, that's pretty much it for all I had to say about the awards thing, unless you had anything else for Nightcrawler.
No, like I said, just that it's a bummer that he didn't get at least recognized for it. I mean, one of life's ongoing mysteries for me as far as the Oscars is concerned is is will Jake Gyllenhaal ever get recognized ever again? Will he ever win an Oscar? That I guess neither of us can answer right now. But you kind of start to wonder that if he couldn't get in for something as riveting and engaging as this, and it's only gonna get harder from here on out. Is he always is he gonna be like that one of those actors that just never wins, but he's in a lot of really good studio movies because he seems like a really good studio actor. Like him being in movies isn't the problem. Like a lot of directors really seem to want to work with him. He's in a lot of mid-budget and high-budget movies, so it kind of makes you wonder if he's ever gonna have his time. Kind of just
and he's also worked with other like really talented filmmakers, David Fincher for Zodiac. He also worked with Denis Villeneuve before in the past for Enemy and Prisoners, I believe. Have you seen Enemy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Enemies a bit more wild than Prisoners, obviously.
Definitely, yeah. And I'm trying to think what other directors he's worked with. Tom Ford, who's a design, was it a wardrobe designer in his own right, and he's worked with some really interesting directors. Even if the films aren't that great, his choice, the fact that he's picking his roles, trying to pick his roles wisely enough and trying to do something different. It isn't just playing the same character over and over again, at least attempting. But it's interesting to see what he's able to do as an actor, and I always give him talent, or I always give him praise for that he's able to sort of try to stretch himself into these roles. But I think the only thing I could say is like maybe he could win an Oscar is maybe as a producer, because we've seen actor turned producers win Oscars. Like George Clooney won an Oscar for producing Argo. There's a couple others I can't think of on the top of my head. Michael Douglas was another one for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I mean, it's a very small. Oh, Frances McDormand, it's another one. I keep forgetting.
McDormand.
Which,
oh
God, yeah, that was another year. I'm just like, I'm never forgetting. Like, I'm never forgiving myself for not making those predictions with like cinematography for Mank, and then the lead acting category is like, especially with the Hopkins, where I was just like, I should have went with my gut with that. So
always go with your gut. That's the moral of everything. Always go with your gut.
Yeah. Even if you're wrong, at least and hey, the other thing I want to take from Josh Parham's book on predicting the awards, and just plan for the what was it hope for the best but plan for the worst.
Exactly. Yep.
And that's pretty much all I had to say about that. So I want to say once again, Zeddy, thank you again for dedicating your time to be here on the show. Before we sign off, is there anything you'd like to plug in for our listeners where we can follow you on?
Thank you again, Matt. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I'm glad that we got to kind of break down the movie too. That this was really fun. You guys can follow me on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. I'm still calling it Twitter. I'm at Nick Zednik. My Letterboxd, which is where you guys can find my film reviews. That's at Zeddy Films. So that's ZEDDYFILMS. So Zeddy Films. And of course, I did plug my podcast at the beginning of the show, but it's at Vigilante 1939, and that's where you guys can hear me more regularly. But yeah, looking forward to the award season as we kind of push into the fall, Matt. Very excited.
Yes, I am too, for Obvious reasons.
More so
But
the
we've already said,
cinematography category,
yeah, and the
and the editing
editing,
category.
who's gonna win lead actor, but I don't want to. Who knows? Maybe this episode will go up Friday, and then by then we'll find out Maestro's a piece of shit. So
I don't think we will,
we'll see.
but yeah.
I don't know. Well, we'll see. We've been surprised before, but we'll see. As far as me, you can follow me and the show itself through Linktree under @Matthew995, where you can follow along on all my social media accounts such as Twitter, Threads, Instagram, and Letterboxd. On the same site, I've also provided a link for where you could listen to more episodes of the show. And if you're ever interested in being in the hot seat, like Zeddy just did today, let me know, and hopefully we can arrange for that appearance to be on the show soon. In the meantime, we hope you guys enjoyed listening to the episode, and we hope to see you at the movies. Take care, guys.